I'm Amy from Doodle Dog Designs. I have this plain, solid, natural colored wool, and I want to use it in rug hooking, but I want it to have the look of more of a checked wool. So I'm going to attempt to do somewhat of a tie-dye to it and see if I can get a little bit more variation in the wool for my rug hooking. So I'm going to try two different methods. I have a piece here that is already felted and ready to hook. This is about 26 by 27. And I am going to take it and do a fan fold on it. And I've got some clips, little clamps. I was thinking like binder clips might work well also. I'm just using the clips to hold it in place until I get my rubber bands on. I'm now going to, just like you would do if you were doing tie-dye, I'm going to put rubber bands I put the rubber bands every 1.5 to 2 inches or so. I did not measure it, I just stuck them on there. So this one is ready to go. And now on my second piece, it is about the same size, but I just have a little chunk cut out of it right here on the end, but I'm still going to use it. And I'm going to do more of a tie-dye bullseye. And so I'm just going to grab the center and bring it up and then pull everything down from the center. And then I will start rubber banding here. Now they are both ready to take to the dye pot. And normally, before I dye fabric, I get the entire piece of fabric wet in order to help the dye penetrate evenly, but I'm not going to do that this time. I'm going to put it in my dye pot while it is dry. I'm using my stainless steel dyeing pot. This is the little pot that I'm going to dissolve my dye in, and then I have a bigger pot to put my wool in to dye it. So I'm going to start in this little pot, and you could do this with any color dye. I like to use Cushing's dyes. They work well on the wools, but today I'm going to use some natural walnut crystals that I made, and these were made from the hulls of the walnuts. You can buy the crystals if you wanted a similar look. The Cushing's has a walnut colored dye. If I was doing the Cushing's dye, I would not use a whole package. I would just use a small, very small amount of it, because I don't want, for the look I'm going for, I don't want a lot of color variation. I just want a little bit. So I'm just going to start with one tiny walnut crystal, and I'm going to bring this pot to a boil and dissolve that, and I'll see what the color looks like after that is dissolved. Decide if I want to add more or not. The walnut crystal is completely dissolved, so I'm now going to pour this into my big dye pot. I have the big pot already starting to heat, and it's about half full with water. You want to make sure you have enough water in there that the wool has room to move around. Seeing the dye in the big dye pot diluted really gives you a better idea of what your finished wool color is going to end up. Now I'm going to let this come to a simmer, and then I will add in the wool. You can see the bubbles forming on the side of the pan, so it's almost at a simmer. So now I'm going to add my wool. Normally when I dye wool, like I said before, I pre-soak the fabric in water and it is wet and it will just go right into the dye bath easily. But since this is dry, it's wanting to float on top of the water, so I'm having to use my spoon to push it down under and get some of the air bubbles out so it will stay in the water. I've got most of the air bubbles out now, so it will stay under the water a little bit better, but I am going to continue turning them occasionally just to make sure that the dye bath gets on both sides of the wool bundles. It has been simmering for about 10 to 15 minutes, and I'm now going to add some vinegar to my dye pot. I don't measure it, but it's probably about 1/4 of a cup or so, and then I will stir that in, and then I will let it simmer for another 10 minutes. It has been 10 minutes now, and you can really see a difference in the dye bath here. The water has gotten a lot lighter in color and the wool has definitely gotten darker. I'm going to turn the stove off and take the wool out and let it cool. After the wool was cool, I went ahead and rinsed it in the sink, and now I'm going to take off the rubber bands. Rinse it again, and then I will hang it up to dry. The wool is dry now, and this is how it turned out. You can see there are some spots where the color of the rubber band bled onto the wool. So if I do this again, I would use white or all of those natural colored rubber bands and not use any colored ones. But I think overall this turned out really well. This is the one that I did with the fan fold. So when I go to hook, I will cut my wool, my strips this way, and that way it will have the variegation showing. If I went this way, they would all be either lighter or darker. So I need to cut the wool in strips this way. Here is a piece of what it was before I did anything. So you can see the lighter part is still very similar to the original color. This is the one that I did with the bullseye tie-dye method, and it made the wool a little bit out of shape. It stretched it out of shape in the middle here, so I'm not very happy with that. There's a lot more of the color here where I obviously had the red or pink rubber band that is showing through, and probably is the way that I folded it up, but it's got a lot of variation on this side and not a lot on this side. So if I was going to do this method again, and I doubt I will, I would be more careful as to how I bundled it and try to make sure that it is even all the way down on what is exposed. So of the two, I much prefer the way that the fan fold turned out. I will do a little hooking with it and I will show you how it turns out. This project was hooked using the wool that was tie-dyed with the fan fold. If you like this video, be sure to check out my other wool dyeing videos.